capes, wraps, even trench coats, with their beginnings around World War I. What are the differences in our modern versions? Simplified, fewer pieces, or more complex? Join us today as we explore the originals and discover great new versions today on Fit2Stitch.
Fit2Stitch is made possible by Vogue Fabrics, Evanston, Illinois; Valdani Threads; Kai Scissors; Sew Steady; OC Sewing, Buena Park, Fullerton, Garden Grove, and Irvine, California; Richland Sewing Center, Dallas, Texas, and the Metroplex; Fabric Warehouse, Lakeland, Florida; Longview Sewing in Longview, Washington; Paramount Sewing in Eugene, Oregon; and Elliott Berman Textiles, New York City.
So now we're going to step it up just a little bit, and we're going to come back and we're going to do this cape here in the middle. So this cape right here, if you notice, I'm only going to use two pieces. I'm going to use the front and the back, and then I'm going to make a collar for it. And the collar is easy enough. I know you can do this. All right, so the only two pieces of the trench coat that I'm going to use are the front and the back. And I'm going to take the front of my pattern and I'm going to fold it right past center front. Whenever I'm looking for a pattern, I'm always going to look for more pieces, because I get my money's worth and I don't have to use all the pieces. And that's the goal of today, is to show you that you could take a trench coat and use all those pieces, but I certainly could take 5 pieces, 4 pieces. In this case, we're going to use 2 pieces and make our third piece, and I get a great look, even, no matter what I decide to do. So I'm going to take my front, I'm going to fold it back at center front. So I'm laying my center front right there. And the only thing I'm going to really take off of this pattern is I'm going to trace the neck edge, and then I'm going to trace the shoulder edge. And that's it. The rest of it I'm just going to play with, and you're going to see how much fun we're going to have with this one. So I'm going to take the French curve, and I'm going to extend it out. And I'm going to extend it out, I went 15 inches, but it just depends on how broad you are and how long you want the cape. Remember, with these capes, there's so much fashion to them that we have lots of variables. So notice what I did is I brought it out to here. I went ahead, I'm just deciding on the length I want. And the only thing you want to do at the bottom is leave just a couple inches shorter on the side than through the middle. And that way you're going to sew in here and sew in here, and you're actually going to have, and I'll show you, you're going to have a bottom to the cape. So let's go back and just look at this for a minute. And I put a belt on here. You certainly don't need that. I think that this is so much the style today to just wear something like this with leggings so that it just covers, and we want to find the best, most comfortable fabric we can. If you notice in this particular case, I used a fabric that's two-sided. So I could hem it, I could leave it. The greatest thing about our finishes today is so many of them have no machine. They're just simply raw and unfinished, and it's a great look. So notice here at the bottom where the length that I want it to be is there, and how wide I want it to be. Those are all my variables. The only thing I want to do now is let's go back and let's draw a collar. And that collar, it's called a full roll collar. And all that means is when we look at the center back of the collar, it comes up and completely covers itself. And all we need to know is a couple things. So the first thing we need to know is how long the neck edge is on the front. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to count seam allowance. I'm going to use these numbers without seam allowance, because that's really the best way and most accurate way to do it. So I'm going to take my seam allowance off here. My seam allowance is 3/8 inch. And remember, this is center front. And I'm just going to count the inches. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.5. Then I'm going to take the back, because that collar is going to go all the way around. I'm going to actually measure the back as well. And remember, again, I'm going to take away the seam allowance. So there's a seam allowance, and there's a seam allowance at the back as well. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I had 4 and 5.5. I'm going to add that together, and most of us will come up with the same answer, which is 9.5. And I'm just going to make one single straight line that's 9.5 inches. Now to that, I'm going to go ahead and add seam allowance. And that way, if you take your seam allowances away and add them at the end, we're going to be much better off, and it's really going to come out much simpler. So I'm going to go ahead and go 9.5, add my seam allowance. I'm going to make that 9 7/8 because I use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then I decide on how wide I'm going to make the collar. And in this case, let's go back and just take a look and just see actually how wide it is, and then we can be exact to it. Notice my edge up here is not even finished. It's completely raw. It's just fun to do it that way. I think if you've been sewing for a long time, it's really fun to break the rules and just kind of do it the way you want to. And we see in fashion today, that collar was 11 inches wide. I'm going to come up and have it be 11 inches. And this particular collar is just simply a rectangle. So that's the neck edge. And you might just mark it. This is the center back. And that neck edge. And then I put this on the fold, because when we measure a neck edge, we only measure half. And then we put it on the fold so it works out to where it's doubled. And we don't have to change the neck edge at all. And we've got our new pattern piece for it. Now also keep in mind that if I decide, because you're the designer now, that I want variables, I can do as many variables as I possibly want to have. If I want to, when I first start measuring the neckline, if I want that neckline to be lower, if I want it to be wider, just take your French curve and change that neckline however you want it. I would recommend sometimes you go to garments that you have and measure the neckline. Take the French curve on those garments and measure them, and then say, oh, I love this neckline. This is the one I want. I just want a collar added to it. So I can go ahead and lower the neckline, widen the neckline, do whatever I want. Once I get my number of how long the front and the back are put together, I'm free to make my collar. And I can label this my collar. I can label it anything I want to in reference to what it is, my wrap, my cape of so-and-so, and I am good to go. And now I can officially call myself a pattern maker because I just made a new pattern.
Fit2Stitch is made possible by Vogue Fabrics, Evanston, Illinois. Valdani Threads. Kai Scissors. Sew Steady. OC Sewing, Buena Park, Fullerton, Garden Grove, and Irvine, California. Richland Sewing Center, Dallas, Texas, and the Metroplex. Fabric Warehouse, Lakeland, Florida. Longview Sewing in Longview, Washington. Paramount Sewing in Eugene, Oregon. And Elliott Berman Textiles, New York City. Get your 4-DVD set of Fit2Stitch Series 5. Here's how.